classrooms. It will go to students equally all across the district, and it will provide basically a lifesaver, a lifeboat for a lot of funding that we're not receiving from the state. Our state, of course, is between, well, about 48th in funding nationally per child, so we really short our students in terms of education. Also, 3A will give our teachers a cost of living increase. That's a very modest, it's not a huge raise. Very important for our teachers. We often blame our teachers today. And so I'm very much in support of 3A. And I just want to draw a very clear distinction that 3A and 3B are two different ballot initiatives and very, very different. So I'll wait to speak about 3B and allow my colleague Mary Sewell on the school board. I'm sure you want to talk about 3A also.
I think so, sure.
All right.
Yeah. As Arturo said, I mean, this is something, the 3A investment is really critical right now to our schools, and as he said, you know, there is a raise in there for teachers. I just want to talk a little bit more about some of the other things it's going to do. First of all, it's going to add 800 ECE, or early childhood education seats for low-income kids in Denver. One of the things that we're really worried about is the continuing achievement gap between low-income kids and middle and upper-income kids. We know if we can get kids into our schools earlier, we can really erase that, and so this is one of the key pieces that would do that. The other piece is around making all kindergarten and DPS full-day kindergarten. We still have a lot of half-day programs, and that's another thing like that we really want to see accomplished. There's money for technology, and so a lot of people, you know, have talked a little bit like, what does that mean in the mill side? We know for teachers, if they can have access to, we call it blended learning, there's lots of other different ways to put it, but it's technology, so when you have kids in the same class that are in different levels, the teacher can use blended learning and technology to help the kids that are behind catch up, that can really be targeted, and that kids that are at grade level or above can accelerate. So it really sort of moves all the kids, and it's a really important tool for teachers. There's other pieces as well. Sorry, I've been talking so much about this. The other piece that we're really finding is making a huge difference in DPS right now, especially in far northeast Denver, is targeted instruction. A lot of times that's tutoring, working with teachers again in the classroom, so that we can have, you know, one tutor to two to three students, and again, that's making an enormous difference. So we've lost about $800 in per pupil funding in the last 4 years because of all the state budget cuts. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. Another reason I think it's really critical to have Democrats in the legislature, because that's who's going to care most about really fixing and righting this crisis we're having in Colorado right now. So we're coming to the voters saying, we know this money, it doesn't replace what we've lost on the state level, but if we can bring these funds in, it's going to make the biggest difference for all children in DPS.
Are there any questions specifically on 3A?
How's the 2A money, I'm sorry, the 3A money allocated among schools? Does everybody get the same number? Is there a list of requirements? Or how's that going to be?
So it varies. So one part I didn't mention is like parent engagement, something that Arturo's been incredibly advocating since he got on the school board. That's a lump sum money, I think of about $500,000 that will go to bring more parent liaisons. So that's one example. The instruction piece I was talking about, that's for targeted grades. So you wouldn't necessarily see a school, you know, that didn't serve those grade levels getting that money. But everything else, I think, is really based on a per pupil amount that goes to serve those kids. And so the mill will impact every single student in DPS. Every student in DPS will get funds based on this.
And every teacher.
And every teacher. Yeah.
Mary, what's the increase in population of students in Denver? I've noticed, you know, anecdotally in my neighborhood, used to have maybe 2 or 3 children under the age of 12, and now we have about 27 in just one block. I mean, it's just incredible. The old suburban flight has been reversed. All the young couples are buying houses in our older neighborhoods, and we have schools right now that are maybe fragile at it, but they're also at capacity. So,
and we'll
what's the number?
Well, I'll give you the number, and then we'll probably talk a little bit more about this on the bond. So we've grown by almost 11,000 students in the last 5 years. We're not just the fastest growing metro area, we're not just the fastest growing school district in the state, we're the fastest growing urban district in the nation. And so 90% of that growth is happening in Northeast Denver. but there is still significant growth, especially on EC and elementary level in Southwest Denver, and then also in Southeast. So you'll see, and we'll talk about the bond, but really trying to address that growth where we can.
All right, now on to the red meat.
Alright, so 3A is a wonderful, and maybe I should move over there. Actually.
Yeah, well, let's
Get away from the door here.
focus on what we agree on.
I don't want to take up the map, but wonderfully. So we talked a little bit about the need for Democrats to regain the majority in the House, and we look at a lot of the players who are trying to prevent that. What would cause a lot of those folks who are trying to prevent our majority in the House from all of a sudden supporting a school measure such as 3B? And if you look at the filing for the campaign around 3A, 3B, they've combined it to distract you from the real issues around 3B. You see that they've raised over $300,000, most of it coming from corporate contributions. There's also private PAC money that is coming in as well to support 3A, 3B because of the 3B measures. So you have folks like Stand for Children who are supporting the opponents of Max Tyler, who are supporting the opponents of Daniel Kagan. And of course, I know Representative Ferrandino, myself and others, and Representative Sewell are going to be, Board Member Sewell, Board President Sewell, are going to be holding a fundraiser to try to help those Democratic candidates and push back against Stand for Children and their push for the Republican candidates that would prevent us from gaining the majority in the state legislature. What would cause all these folks to all of a sudden donate huge sums of money, putting up billboards? What would cause Walmart Foundation to put $50,000 towards a school measure? We have to ask ourselves, why are all these folks getting involved? And what you have is a $466 million bond measure, okay, that will be unprecedented in the amount of monies that will go directly to privately run, publicly funded schools, otherwise known as charter schools. And this is something that, you know, if you're for that happening, then it's not so alarming about this bond. If you really want public money going towards these elite charter schools that can prevent some students from coming in and push students out, the kids that they don't want, we're going to put in, from my estimation, $187 million of this bond into those schools, directly to those schools. So it's not about being fair to charter schools. We're actually providing favoritism to those schools, and the district now has very much tacked to the right in terms of moving towards privatization of our public education. And we're asking you, as the taxpayers under this bond, to subsidize that privatization, which goes even further than just privatizing. We're asking taxpayers to fund facilities so that then they can come in and do this. Granted, the charter schools in Colorado have to set up a local board of community members, but that local board then goes back and hires and purchases services from the private entity, the for-profit entity that provides their education services. So it's very interesting what's happening. My main concern is the inequity of it. If this was resulting in more students being served, the kids who really need it, receiving the monies that they need for their schools, then I would be okay. But what we have is like $38.5 million going towards a facility that supposedly is supposed to serve the Stapleton community. And what really concerns me is we thought that Stapleton was going to integrate with the larger Park Hill neighborhood and help fill those seats, those 400 empty seats at Smiley Middle School, those 900 empty seats at Manual High School. We all know what Manual's been through. The 500 empty seats at George Washington. And instead, what we're doing is we're asking you to fund a school that will result, a facility that will result in a school that is segregated, a school that will create a train track, you know, crossing the train tracks, the haves and have-nots in Denver, along Quebec. We're also asking you to fund to the tune of almost $15 million, a school out in Colorado Heights, where there's not a need for capacity for new students. And that is going to go directly to Denver School of Science and Technology. We're also asking you to fund $20 million to give Denver School of Science and Technology a school in central Denver. We're asking you to fund $17 million for more co-location, such as the planned co-location of a Strive charter school at North High School, which thank you very much for paying for that renovation last time in the 2008 bond project. But now I don't think voters realize that we were paying for a lot of schools that aren't going to serve all the students. And as Board President Sewell mentioned, we have high needs out in the Southwest. We have Lincoln High School. This is one good example. Lincoln High School is very overcrowded. Lincoln High School is very high poverty. Lincoln High School has shown great growth. We're only putting $5 million into Lincoln we're asking you to put in $5 million out of this $466 million bond into Lincoln. The president came there last year, and it was difficult because the president couldn't drink the water, saw the deterioration of the building at Lincoln, saw the condition that the students had to operate in, and made comments about it. You know, I don't know if anyone else was able to attend. I was there. But we're only going to put $5 million into that school, and we're not even going to fix the drinking water pipes right now, unless something happens. We're only planning to fix the pipes to the swimming pool. Now you compare that to the $38.5 million to Stapleton. Again, I disagree with the majority of the board that says we're going to have a critical need for capacity out there. If you go out there, if you've ever been by the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, this is a hop, skip, and a jump from the Arsenal, between the Arsenal and the Northfield Shopping Center. It's on the north side of I-70. It's 4 miles away from any central point in Stapleton. I rode my bike, and it is very far. So I feel bad for the Stapleton folks who want a neighborhood school because they're not getting something they could walk their kids to or even bike to. It's only 0.6 miles further than Manual High School that has 900 empty seats. So there's a lot of issues, but I know I need to wrap up. This is just the tip of the iceberg. If you would please look at the information I brought, if you would look at our website, on3vdenver.com. There's a lot more issues, and I'd be happy to stay for questions. You can help us build a better bond next year. If we vote this one down, we can put on a more modest and a more responsible bond on next year's election like we did in 2003 when we passed a bond in and out here. Thank you.
And we will take questions after your remarks.
So I have some disagreements with my esteemed colleague on a lot of these issues. I don't want to get into kind of a tit-for-tat debate for a couple of reasons. One, I respect his service on the board. I mean, this is a really hard job that we do together, and I strongly believe that when you have board members debating who agree on so much that it doesn't help the district and it doesn't help the institution of the board altogether. So I'm going to respond to some of the things he said, but I just want to state again my respect for his service. So the biggest thing is, and Arturo gave the amount, it's $466 million. $230 million of that is for maintenance in buildings. So that's your roofs, that's your boilers, that's fire safety systems, that's your ADA issues, trying to make schools that may be in compliance but could be much more accessible. If the bond doesn't pass, next year we'll have to figure out how to find $50 million for those most immediate needs that will then get cut out of the general fund. That's the fund that goes to our classrooms, to our schools, that's teacher salaries, that's principal salaries, that's textbooks. I mean, so the ramifications of this not passing and what it would do immediately to the district are pretty amazing. We already had $62 million less than we had 4 years ago this year. That's a $62 million cut we're making every year because of the state cuts. Add to that $50 million, and this district's in huge trouble. So the other big amount on the bond is for new capacity, and I just told you a little bit about the growth that's happening in Denver. The process to bring forward this recommendation came from a committee of people called the CPAC, and it was really people coming in from around the city of Denver looking at the need as opposed to board members sort of advocating for their own districts. It was like, we want to have at least a baseline for our discussions, something that's really based on the need of DPS. So they came forward and said, here is what we believe that needs to go forward on this bond. It was based on an analysis, again, of the city, of the current state of schools and the growth. One of the things they recommended was this $38.5 million 6 through 12 campus that would serve Stapleton. It was originally supposed to be for 1,800 students. We had over $1 billion of need for this. We cut it in half. So that was one of the projects that, even though the demand would fill an 1,800 person school, it was cut down to 900, and the size of the project was cut in half. Being someone who lives in Northeast Denver, You know, we are really looking at a corridor of schools, and Arturo's right about saying where the location is. It's pretty much on a line, on a corridor with Montbello High School, and then the schools in Green Valley Ranch. And I really see, just personally, Stapleton as part of that far northeast group. It's kind of the bridge between Park Hill and near northeast and far northeast. And there's an incredible opportunity if we have space to make all of these schools diverse, something that every member of the board is really committed to having socioeconomically integrated schools. The challenge with Stapleton has been we don't have enough space because the schools are so overcrowded. There are seats available at Smiley, and that absolutely is going to be one of the solutions, something I've been working on with the Park Hill and Stapleton communities, about how that middle school can stay a neighborhood school for Park Hill, but that the community is expanded to include Stapleton students, and I think there's some really creative ways to do that, and I think that community is really starting to get excited about some of the possibilities. Manuel's recently asked to start a middle school, and so part of it is sort of trying to understand where they are in their growth. We're only going to have, for a neighborhood that already has the need, that it's going to be the size of Inglewood, you know, Manuel's going to be impacted, the growth is going to be impacted. What we're putting on there is just enough to serve the current need when we get to that 6th to 12th grade level. So the last thing I'll talk about is really around the charter piece. About 9% of Denver students are in charters. 9% of the funding in the maintenance part of the bond is for district facilities that house charters. And we do have a few of those, well, we have a good number of those in Denver. It's not a large number. And what's really interesting about Denver, excuse me, than other parts of the city, is for a charter to be able to use a district facility, they have to have open enrollment. It's centralized within DPS. They have to serve special needs kids. They have to serve and have plans for how to serve English language learners. They have to take kids at any point during the year. Charters in Denver, and the ones that are succeeding with low-income kids, and they're making a tremendous difference in their lives. I am, a public school person. These are public schools. I'm pretty agnostic if a school can succeed. I don't support for-profit schools on any level, and in Denver, these are not-for-profits. They're no different in my eyes than Florence Crittenton. I don't know if you know that. That's a contract school that serves teenage mothers and gives them child care and helps them graduate from high school and go on to college. It's exactly the same. Florence Crittenton's getting $6 million out of this bond in order to be able to have a high school so that those women, young women and girls can actually graduate from.
Right.
Oh, I got it. So it's not this clearly defined issue. We have a spectrum of schools and choices, very important in DPS. Our neighborhood schools are very important. What we're trying to do is really create a system where communities can really find the best school and that all schools are supported, and I really strongly believe that Smart did it. Last thing, 3A and 3B are totally interlinked. In order to do the ECE seats in 3A, we have to have the space in 3B. In order to do the blended learning and technology in 3A, we have to be able to do the changes to the buildings so they have Wi-Fi and other infrastructure to make that happen. They go together. And so I really hope you'll support 3A and B. Denver Post supported it. Democratic Central Committee endorsed it. The mayor, some of our awesome elected officials, and so please join us.
Thank you both so much for your time. Obviously, we could talk about this for the next 4 hours, but we're going to take two questions, and go ahead, Ray.
Hi, Ray Ehrenstein, precinct
Good to see you.
240. Good to see you both. I have a question for both of you. After a short statement, Byers School was shuttered and empty for years. We, the voters, approved an $8 million to save Byers School and bring it make it accessible for the public schools. That $8 million was taken by the school board and spent elsewhere, disappeared completely from Byers School. So at that point, DSST, Denver School of Science and Technology, a non-profit, came on in and said, we'll take that location and we'll turn it into a School of Science and Technology. I was among the citizens who went around in support of this because the lost $8 million from before, and Denver Public Schools had dropped the ball as far as I was concerned. Now it seems that they did get, it is now allowed for that nonprofit to have a school there, but once again, we're going to ask to supply money to achieve this. How many times are we asked for money, and when will we see the money go to where it's supposed to be directed?
Do you want me to answer first?
Sure. Why don't you start, and then Arturo, if you have something to add.
So those are really good questions. I wasn't on the board when they made that decision to redirect the money, but what we did this time with this bond